It is a reptile from the prehistoric age, unchanged, unchallenged, and still deadly. The Komodo dragon doesn't chase, it doesn't roar, it waits, silent, calculating, and when it strikes, it only bites once. But that single bite unleashes a biological ambush. Venom that prevents clotting, and bacteria that quietly rot the body from within. This isn't a legend from ancient times. It's a threat unfolding today. In isolated villages, in nature reserves, and maybe one day, beyond the island. It is the largest lizard on Earth. It can smell blood from miles away. And worst of all, it's getting smarter. Because buried inside this ancient creature is a weapon no predator should possess. At first glance, the Komodo dragon looks like a prehistoric relic. 3 meters long, nearly 200 pounds, slow and lumbering. But don't be fooled. When it bites, it doesn't need to kill you right away. Because inside that jaw lies something far more terrifying than brute force. Its teeth are razor sharp and curved backward, designed to rip, not just puncture. But that's not the real killer. What truly turns the Komodo's bite into a death sentence is what lives inside its mouth. Decaying flesh, rotting meat, dozens, sometimes hundreds of deadly bacteria festering between every tooth. It's like being bitten by a sewer full of biohazards. But here's the twist. That's not even the worst part. For decades, scientists thought the Komodo killed through infection. But in 2009, a shocking discovery rewrote everything. The Komodo dragon has venom glands, real ones. And what it injects into your bloodstream isn't just poison, it's an anticoagulant. It prevents your blood from clotting. You don't feel pain, you feel weak, dizzy. You start bleeding out. Slowly, quietly. Its bite doesn't just tear flesh, it turns your body against you. And then, the dragon walks away. It doesn't chase, it doesn't roar, it just follows for hours, even days, waiting for you to fall. But this isn't even the worst part of its strategy. What happens next is truly chilling. Imagine being hunted? Not by something fast, not by something loud, but by something patient. Once the Komodo delivers its venomous bite, it doesn't waste energy chasing its prey. Instead, it steps into the shadows and waits. Its victim, bleeding, confused, getting weaker by the hour, tries to run, to hide, but it's no use. Because the dragon follows silently, for miles, sometimes for an entire day. Komodos have an extraordinary sense of smell. They can detect blood from nearly 10 kilometers away, and they use their tongue like a radar, tasting the air, tracing every movement you make. This isn't brute force. This is strategy. And it works not just on deer or pigs. It works on humans, too. They won't chase you. They'll wait for you to collapse. In the wild, it's the long game that wins. Komodos don't just kill. They calculate. And when they finally return to their victim, hours or days later, what they find is barely moving, barely breathing, easy to finish. What do you think about this predator's haunting hunting strategy? Tell us in the comments below. And don't miss what's coming next. The year was 2007. A Komodo dragon entered a small Indonesian village on the island of Komodo. A local boy, just 8 years old, was playing near a hill when the dragon struck. No warning, no growl, just speed, precision, silence. By the time villagers arrived, it was too late. His small body had been dragged into the underbrush, massive bite wounds, arterial bleeding. There was nothing anyone could do. But if you think Komodos only go after small prey, think again. In the wild, they've been observed ambushing adult deer, wild pigs, even water buffalo. One bite, then patience. They don't chase, they follow. Hours later, when the venom has done its job, the Komodo returns. It tears into the soft belly first. The organs, the lungs, the heart. The prey is often still alive when the feeding begins. In some documented cases, Komodo dragons have swallowed goats and pigs whole, dislocating their jaws like snakes. And when one dragon feeds, others soon arrive. Not to share, but to consume together, in a frenzy of blood and bone. Even bones aren't safe. Their stomach acid is so strong, it can dissolve entire skeletons within hours. This isn't nature as harmony. This is nature as war. But what happens when humans try to stop such a creature? Most of the time, we fail. How do you stop a Komodo dragon? You can't outrun it. Despite its bulky frame, it can sprint up to 20 kilometers per hour, faster than most humans over short distances. You can't climb to escape it. They're expert climbers in their youth and ruthless ground hunters as adults. What about fences? Locals have tried building walls, wooden barriers, stone fences, even electric ones. But the dragons dig under, push through, or simply wait until a door is left open. They're not just strong, they're opportunistic. Some researchers tried using tranquilizer darts. In theory, that should work. But Komodos have thick, armored skin, scaled and rugged like ancient armor. Darts often bounce off or fail to deliver a proper dose. Others thought fire might scare them. It doesn't. There are stories of dragons walking through burning brush with no hesitation, as if pain barely registers. In zoos, steel enclosures work, barely. But out in the wild? On their home turf? Humans are always a step behind. You can't outrun it. You can't scare it. You can't even reason with it. So what do? Turns out, the only people who consistently survive encounters with Komodos aren't scientists, rangers, or tourists. They're the ones who've lived beside these creatures for centuries. Villagers who've studied Komodos not with tools, but with tradition. Because on the islands where Komodos rule, survival isn't about strength, it's about ancient wisdom. On Komodo Island, there are no panic buttons, no tranquilizer guns, no steel walls. And yet, people live. Children play. Goats graze in the open. So what's their secret? The villagers of Komodo, Rinca, and Flores have lived alongside dragons for generations. They don't rely on technology. They rely on observation, memory, and instinct. Never walk alone. Never wander at dusk. Never let blood drip on the ground. These aren't superstitions, they're survival codes. Elders teach children how to recognize the warning signs. A shift in wind, a sudden silence in the forest, a flicker of scales behind a rock. They carry long, sharpened sticks, not to fight, but to buy time. Because when the dragon comes, you don't attack, you stand your ground. They also follow rules outsiders might overlook. Never leave food scraps in the open. Never build homes too close to cliffs. Komodos push prey off edges. And always cover open wounds. The smell of blood carries for kilometers. Sometimes ancient instincts are smarter than modern science. For them, survival isn't heroic. It's routine. It's ritual. But their wisdom has one blind spot. Because what happens if the dragons leave the island? If climate change, tourism, or the black market open the gates? The real danger isn't just that Komodos exist. It's what happens when they appear where no one expects them. And now, a quick question for you. If this part made you think twice about how humans survive beside monsters, comment 1 below. If it felt boring, be honest. Drop a 0. For now, the Komodo dragon is mostly confined to a handful of Indonesian islands, but nature doesn't stay inside fences forever. Rising global temperatures have already begun shifting ecosystems. What was once too cold for a Komodo may soon become survivable. And if just a few eggs smuggled through the black market reach foreign soil, the consequences could be irreversible. Already, Komodo dragons have been illegally sold to private collectors and exotic zoos. Some are kept in barely legal enclosures. One mistake, one broken gate, one flood or fire, and suddenly, we're not dealing with a myth. We're dealing with an invasive, lethal predator walking through unfamiliar forests with no natural enemies. Imagine a juvenile Komodo loose in the Everglades, in rural Australia, even in a remote ranch in Texas, in places full of prey, and very few people who know how to deal with it. Should Komodos still be protected, or should they be controlled? Conservationists argue that Komodos are vulnerable and rare, that they deserve sanctuary, not suspicion. But ecologists warn, it only takes one wrong introduction to tip the balance of an entire ecosystem. Because if we wait until one appears in our backyard, it might already be too late. Could Komodos spread worldwide? For now, the Komodo dragon is mostly confined to a handful of Indonesian islands. But nature doesn't stay inside fences forever. Rising global temperatures have already begun shifting ecosystems. What was once too cold for a Komodo may soon become survivable. And if just a few eggs, smuggled through the black market, reach foreign soil, the consequences could be irreversible. Already, Komodo dragons have been illegally sold to private collectors and exotic zoos. Some are kept in barely legal enclosures. One mistake, one broken gate, one flood or fire, and suddenly, we're not dealing with a myth. We're dealing with an invasive, lethal predator walking through unfamiliar forests with no natural enemies. Imagine a juvenile Komodo loose in the Everglades, in rural Australia, even in a remote ranch in Texas, in places full of prey and very few people who know how to deal with it. Should Komodos still be protected, or should they be controlled? Conservationists argue that Komodos are vulnerable and rare, that they deserve sanctuary, not suspicion. But ecologists warn, it only takes one wrong introduction to tip the balance of an entire ecosystem. Because if we wait until one appears in our backyard, it might already be too late. We fear the Komodo dragon because it kills without mercy, because it doesn't blink, doesn't hesitate, doesn't explain, but maybe that's just instinct. Cold, honest, unapologetic. It doesn't kill for sport. It doesn't destroy its environment. It simply survives, the way it has for millions of years. We, on the other hand, we poison rivers. We erase forests. We smuggle life across borders for entertainment and profit. So if Komodos are monsters, what does that make us? If we were born with venom in our veins, would we call it evil or just nature? Before you leave, ask yourself this. Are we trying to stop the dragon, or simply trying to stay on top of the food chain? Thank you for watching. If this video gave you something to think about, leave a comment below. Type 1 if you see the Komodo dragon differently now. Type 0 if you think humans are still the bigger threat. And don't forget to subscribe. The wild has more secrets than you think.